we are rolling. Hey everybody, it's Sean. Welcome back to another episode of the 1455 interview. This continues to be an illuminating and, for me personally, very fun series, talking to talented, interesting, experienced writers about what goes on, inside their heads, and we never know what to expect. So today is no exception, and I'm really happy and honored to bring back a friend who fans of 1455 should already know Jeanne McCulloch because she's been in our last two Lit Fests. She's been part of our author series, and she is about to be part of the first rollout of our formal workshop series. So if you like what you hear today and want to go back and check out the other things she's done, which are on our website, you can get private tutelage from Ms. McCulloch coming up soon. So more on that later. Let me introduce her, and then we'll bring her on. Jeanne McCulloch is former managing editor of the Paris Review, a former senior editor of Tin House, and the founding editorial director of Tin House Books. Her memoir, All Happy Families, which is enthusiastically recommended, was published by Harper Wave, Harper Collins in 2018. She resides in Brooklyn, New York. Jeanne, welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be in the hot seat today.
Good. Well, this, when I made my short list up when this started, you were on the short list. So here we are. And without further ado,
as I said to you, I'm honored to be in part of your hardcore at 1455. It's
right on. Well, the pleasure and honor is ours. So I can't wait to hear what you have to say. So as always, let me set the timer for 1455 and let's go. Jeanne, the first book that made you want to be a writer, or a book that changed your life?
They may be the same, and I'm going to mention two books. When I was in around 8th grade, 9th grade, I went to an all-girls school, and I was coming of age in the early 70s. So this was a time where a lot of women writers were finding their voice and speaking. And I had an English teacher. I was sort of messing around with bad poems and attempts at essays and stories. And she gave me two collections of essays. One was Slouching Toward Bethlehem, which was Joan Didion's first collection. And the second was Crazy Salad, which was Nora Ephron's first collection. And that opened up my eyes because I felt as though here were women who were actually speaking conversationally, but so artfully and beautifully about life. Yeah. And it was simple, but it wasn't simple. It was just beautiful and precise. And it made me feel as though, oh, I can hear these voices and I can respond to them, and maybe my voice will reach out to other people with enough practice and enough time. So I would say probably those two. And then later on in high school, I picked up the poetry of Adrienne Rich, who, wrote very formal, strict poetry until a certain age. And then it all broke down and broke apart and was less formal. And it was also as her feminism was being given voice. And she's also a wonderful essayist. So I would say all of those books, and I would be remiss if I didn't add The Waves by Virginia Woolf, which is just gorgeous, and I reread it every year.
Wow, you just covered like four, women who left an indelible imprint on the 20th century and beyond, of course.
Yeah, no, I know, and Joan Didion's still writing, beautiful.
Still writing brilliantly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so who would you say your most profound artistic influence is?
I would, again, go back to Joan Didion, and I would say why is because she wrote an essay when she was 26 years old, and she worked at Vogue, called On Self-Respect, and it still holds up all these years later. She wrote it, I think, in 1961. As it happened, I ended up, in my first job was in the features department of Vogue magazine, and that's not an accident, by the way. And Dorothy Parker, not to compare myself to these two great women writers, but she had also started in the features department of Vogue magazine for some reason. But again, Didion is somebody that just seems like a master of both nonfiction and fiction. She's figured out how to bridge that gap. The Writers at Work interviews, there's 2 with her. One's on nonfiction and one's on fiction. And it's interesting to read them back to back, actually, because it really gives you a sense of craft in both genres. So I would say she's been one of the most profound, and Virginia Woolf also, just because of her beautiful work and the way she broke down form and really was on the forefront of modernism in the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And that work holds up. It was very ahead of its time in many ways.
Yes. Thank you. How about an album or movie or both that you recommend without reservation?
This movie, I don't know if you know it or if anyone knows it. It's called Cold Comfort Farm, and it came out in 1995. And John Schlesinger, I believe, was the director of it. Even McKellen was in it and a few other people. It's hilarious, for starters, but loosely the plot is there is a young woman who is aspiring to be a writer, and she lives in society, England, London, and she realizes she needs to break away from that mold and get somewhere else where she can work on her writing. And she goes and lives with these madly eccentric relatives in the countryside. And so that's the setup. And at first, you know, when it opens up, you're like, oh my God, these people are completely batshit crazy. But over time, you realize this is like any writer's dream in a way, is to land with these people. So it's hilarious, and
Okay.
I highly recommend it.
Right on. Have heard of it, but I don't think I've ever seen it. So
You'll get some laughs.
okay. Good. What would you say is for your vote for best first or last line of any book ever?
Well, the title of my memoir is All Happy Families. So I would have to say all happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in their own way.
Impossible to quibble with. And that was one of the first things when we first met, I mean, of course, I knew, you know, I got the reference right away. And considering what the theme and topic of your memoir was, well played.
Well, thank you. Thank you. There's some other great ones, but that's at the top.
We haven't had that one yet. Good. Yeah, there's too many great ones, but that's kind of the fun of this. You got to pick one.
Yeah.
Okay, my obligatory sardonic self-indulgent question. Why haven't you read Moby Dick? Or if you have, what's a classic that you haven't gotten around to yet that you want to read?
I did read Moby Dick, but I have not read War and Peace.
I confessed to, I don't know if it was Robert Anthony Siegel, that came up a couple of interviews ago, and my alibi excuse was, for years in my 20s, I'd say I'm going to dedicate a summer to this, and invariably I'd say, but I could read 15 other books, and I've always found an excuse not to do it, but I'm with you. It has to be read at some point.
Yeah, and I did once dedicate a summer to reading Ulysses.
Okay.
And it was worth it to do it, but I was also getting credit in graduate school for it. So I'm not, it's not like me just sitting in a hammock reading Ulysses.
Right.
But yes, these books, you almost wish you could go back to school and spend a summer, because War and Peace, I feel as though it's so rich, and you could probably read it 40 times and get new stuff.
Yep. All right, that's on both of our lists. Okay. Would you be able to describe a single theme or topic or issue that your work tries to address?
I think the one that I keep coming back to, and I've made some conscious efforts to depart from it, but then I realized that it probably all roads lead back home, is home, and what home means. And I've often opened up a writing workshop I'm teaching by giving that as the first prompt. Just write about home for half an hour and come back, whatever home means to you. Because it means so many different things in so many different ways. I mean, there's the theme of the dysfunctional family in the home, which is definitely something I've written quite a bit about. But there's also that sense of just, where are you anchored? Where do you feel anchored, as opposed to just being out there in the shaky seas? And I think as humans, but certainly as writers, we're all looking for that. We're all looking for home.
And Liz, as a fan of your memoir, allow me to say that you explore that topic poetically and philosophically and very beautifully. So
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Writing routines. Do you believe in them and do you have one?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
I do believe in them. And I know some people just write on the fly, or they write only when they have an assignment, which fair enough if that works for you. I find even if I'm on the road or whatever I'm doing, if I don't turn everything off first thing in the morning for at least half an hour, if not an hour, and write, and it may not be necessarily on the thing I'm working on at the time, I may give myself a prompt. I do that quite a bit. I keep like a book of prompts that when I think of them for my students, and then sometimes I go back and give them to myself. I just think it's good, but I do think the proviso in doing that kind of one to make it work is you really have to suspend your judgment. Your censor really has to still be asleep because you're just like getting whatever it is going to be. And sometimes it's something you can come back to even years later and find, aha, that's what I was trying to say.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So combined with that, how about writer's block? Do you believe in it? And what do you think of it?
I'm going to read you something on that topic.
Excellent.
If I, here, let me get this. 2 dogs just walked in, so excuse me.
Dogs are welcome. We're a dog-friendly endeavor.
This is from an interview with William Maxwell that was in the Paris Review, his Writers at Work interview. And as you know, he was not only a beautiful writer of fiction, a real stylist, but he was also the fiction editor of The New Yorker for years and years and years, and really was responsible for nurturing some of the most important writers. And he said, I don't think writer's block is anything more than a loss of confidence. It certainly isn't a loss of talent.
There it is.
And
Yeah.
I think we all have those moments where we have a real crisis in confidence. I think it's a mistake at that point to say you're blocked. I think it's better to say, okay, I've like lost my nerve here. Why? Let me see if I can get through this. Because it is true, people's talent doesn't just go away, right? But you can shut off your own writer's voice by freaking yourself out pretty easily. We're all really good at that. Yeah. So I love that. I love that Maxwell. And he's another wonderful writer of that era, mid-century.
That's
wonderful.
Great. And I hadn't heard that quote, so thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Sure.
Okay. How about, would you care to discuss briefly a significant setback, artistic or otherwise, that put you on a different trajectory in your career?
Yes. When I mentioned that my first job had been at Vogue magazine, which was an interesting place to first get a byline because, as Gay Talese famously said, being a writer, a prose writer in the features department at Vogue is like being the piano player at the whorehouse. Yes, you may be playing very well, but really nobody's paying attention. That's not the point of why they're there. Which means it's a very good place to cut your teeth because you get a byline, and I had many adventures and misadventures there. But by the time I left and I went on to be the managing editor of the Paris Review, I was writing book reviews and I was writing profiles and I was writing travel essays and all sorts of things. And I naively thought that I could be the managing editor of the Paris Review and keep writing. And I found that I got so busy and involved in nurturing other writers and giving voice to other writers that I wasn't writing as much. And I would occasionally write an essay and publish it somewhere, but I had lost my original intention. I was doing something else that I really valued and I wouldn't give up for anything in the world. But I do consider that in retrospect a real setback that I didn't just somehow fight through there and keep writing or leave. Many people did that. They did that for a few years and then they left and
this is a good follow-up to that because it kind of you kind of set the tone. How would you describe the way you've developed your career?
Well, obviously all wrong based on what I just said. No, I think what happened is I had started out as a writer. I very much wanted to be a magazine writer. But then when I was at Vogue, it was very hard to get the literary assignments, right? Because and there was some great ones. I mean, in those days, Truman Capote was still alive, and there were people to interview that were really, it was a rich environment in that way. But they usually would go to the senior people.
Yeah.
So when I went to the Paris Review, it just felt like, as I said to George Plimpton in the interview, and he said, "Why do you want to do this?" Blah. And I said, because being at a literary magazine feels like being in the sandbox with all the best toys.
Oh, that's perfect.
And so from there, I really devoted myself for a good 30 years to being an editor and nurturing other people.
Yeah.
And then, I published my first book when I was 60. So that's either good or that's not good, but it's how it happened.
Yeah.
So no regrets, but.
Good for you. So how would you define or explain what literary success means to you?
I think that literary success probably has less to do with one's advance and one's sales figures and the money one is putting in their checking deposit as really feeling like you are doing the best by yourself. I have heard many writers say, and I say it myself too on occasion, if something didn't do as well as you wanted it to, like a book didn't do as well as you wanted it to, you say, yeah, that sucks, but if I saw it in a bookstore now, I wouldn't change a word. I don't have that temptation to go in there with a pencil and say, I didn't mean that. Everybody in this bookstore actually meant this. I think in a way that is literary success if we're to take it off the financial plane, that's another whole topic.
Yeah. So we always make sure we get the last question in. We did a good job. We got all the way to the end. Would you be willing to offer a 1-minute exhortation for a beginning writer looking for advice?
Read everything. Read everything. Keep a notebook. That's
it, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, well, what this series shows and what all these books they're all worthwhile and all worth reading, the books about craft, the interviews with writers, certain themes do emerge. And I think the two things that are, inviolable and repeatedly resurface is you have to read a lot and be curious, and you have to do the writing. It might not be good, but you have, writer's block can probably be overcome if you sit down and write. You're not wrong. Doesn't mean you're doing it, but you're doing it.
Right. If you accept that writer's block is a failure of confidence, then just go for it. And I would add the Writers at Work series, which are now anthologized, are also great for beginning writers. I read them when I was in college. My boyfriend and I would go and get them from the library and read them. And we both wanted to be writers. And I don't know, I mean, last I heard he was doing something quite other. But I really, I think those are really good too. Yep.
Well, and we've talked about this already in the series, the notion that perseverance is also, just like rejection, the ones that thrive usually are the ones that have stuck around, and the ones that they weren't meant to be writers because they stopped writing.
Well, that's it. And, I think you can make a big mistake by letting somebody tell you you're not a writer. Right. You're the judge of that.
That's right. So, folks, do you understand now why we are such big fans of this writer and why we're so happy that she's going to be leading workshops in conjunction with 1455? If you haven't checked out All Happy Families and you want a good read, check it out. Go to the website, go to our YouTube page, see her at the Lit Fest in action, reading from the memoir, and check out our workshop page and take a workshop or two.
I'm doing the art of the personal essay, and I would love to have whoever you are out there that I can't see come work with me. It would be my pleasure.
Well, Jane, it's an honor, as always, a genuine honor to be your friend and talk to you. We're so thrilled to collaborate and brainstorm with you. So we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, good. And all my things back at you. I agree. And
right on.
See you all soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Jane.